I don't know, many of us know that today is the birthday of Swami Dayanand Saraswati. And we have with us Dr. Belu Mehra, and I'm told she used to teach in Oro University at one point. Yes. So she's the director of Bharat Shakti Sri Aurobindo Society, Puducherry. It focuses on Indian culture and integral education. Impressively, she holds a PhD from the University of Illinois, Masters from Delhi School of Economics, and she's also a former professor at Antioch University, USA, moved to India in 2007, and she's pursuing Sri Aurobindo studies. She edits Renaissance and has authored books as well, including a book called Antaryatra, Soul Journeys and the Spiritual Foundations of Indian Culture. So we're very happy to hear you. We're looking forward to hearing from you, ma'am. Come, and I will, yes, please come on stage. I would also like to invite Professor Nimesh Joshi to felicitate ma'am.
Okay. Namaste, good afternoon. Nimesh ji told me it's post-lunch session, so all responsibility is mine to keep you awake. And I'm making it easier for Nagendra ji who is coming after me. So, okay. So how this topic came about, as we were discussing in the, our planning meetings, that since we are starting the conference on this particular day, which is birthday of Swami Dayanand Saraswati, and Sri Aurobindo has spoken quite gloriously of Swamiji's contribution to the discovery of Veda, which is the theme of the conference. So we thought it would be important to pay a tribute to that. So just to kind of put it a little bit context around that, I thought maybe this could be the way to understand Swami Dayanand and Indian Renaissance insights from Sri Aurobindo. That's what I will share a few things. And I just wanted to introduce here, many of you may have already come across these words of Sri Aurobindo. If you haven't, then hopefully this will make you curious to go and read a little bit more what he has said on Swami Dayanand Saraswati. And also connected to where, there is a very beautiful phrase Sri Aurobindo has coined, spiritual practicality. So spirituality is not just about, as we've heard in the morning also, it's not about escape or going away from the field of action, but connecting it to concrete action. And it was in the context of his appraisal, his assessment of Swami Dayanand Saraswati's work and his approach to Vedic knowledge and the impact of Vedic knowledge, or rather the foundation that Vedic knowledge gives to nation-building work. That's where Sri Aurobindo coined this phrase, spiritual practicality. And I myself have found this phrase very important in my understanding of Sri Aurobindo's work as well. So that thread of continuity is very important. So a little bit background of Swami Dayanand. As I said, he was born 12th February 1824, 1883 he passed away. these are some of the phrases that Sri Aurobindo has used. His name, the name with which he was born, was Mool Shankar Tiwari. And it's very interesting, the word Mool Shankar, because just 3 days after we have Shivaratri. It was on a Shivaratri that he had that one major experience which actually made him, he was just 12, 13 at that time. And his father was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. And during a Shivaratri observance, all-night observance in the Shiva temple, he saw a mouse eating offerings that devotees had made to the lingam. And he said, what is this Lord who cannot even keep the offerings, his food safe? How can he be my protector, my savior, or savior of the world? So that led him on a quest as to who is this divine, or what is this divine? And so he left home and he, traveled all over India. But that's a different story, and we don't have time to go into his life story. But in terms of what he contributed, and it was his guru who gave him the name Dayanand Saraswati. Saraswati because he became a devotee of knowledge, a seeker of knowledge. So that's how this phrase came. So this is what Sri Aurobindo said. He was a restorer of the Veda, and he found Vedas as the rock of ages. That this is the rock of ages that Indian civilization has formed itself on. Whatever beautiful, whatever good, whatever noble, whatever true Indian civilization has offered humanity, it is on the foundation of Veda itself, Vedic knowledge itself. Sri Aurobindo also made a very interesting comparison of Swami Dayanand Saraswati with the kind of very important work Swami Vivekananda did, because they were in a sense, all luminaries of the Indian Renaissance. So Sri Aurobindo makes a comparison that while Swami Vivekananda he said he kind of diffused in a spiritual way, the energy way, into the Indian soil. Swami Dayanand Saraswati, however, did it in a more direct way. And he said he was sort of as if a sculptor would look at how he would carve in granite and stone, which will stay forever. So that concreteness of his work was very important. He used beautiful phrases to explain or give tribute to Swami Dayanand. He said he was a soldier of light, a warrior in God's world, a sculptor of men and institutions. And this is beautiful. This is where the connection between his work and Sri Aurobindo's work becomes interesting. And if I have not put it there, I'll read it out here. A bold and rugged victor of the difficulties which matter presents to spirit. If Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is about synthesizing matter and spirit, the clue to that he found in Swami Dayanand's approach to his work, which he described as spiritual practicality. So he stamped his vision like bronze and granite. Recovery of the Vedas. This is the part that is part of our conference here. So in the morning, I think Alok Da or our chief guest was talking about, how typically the Vedas were understood as ritualistic texts, or even verse was, these are just poems or liturgies done by barbaric, primitive mind. So in that context, and whatever Western commentaries had come by then were also following this line. So in that context, Swami Dayanand Saraswati's work becomes very important, because he was the first one to recover the truth of the Veda. That's why Sri Aurobindo says, in future, whatever other interpretation comes of the Veda will be fine. But Swami Dayanand Saraswati will always have the honor of discovering the right clues at the first, in the very beginning. So that part is very important. He restored Vedas as living sculptures of divine knowledge, divine worship, and divine action. All the three yogas that we were discussing or hearing about in the morning, he found all of these three, clues to all of these three in his study of the Veda. One of the key insights on which he based his knowledge or his understanding or his interpretation of the Veda was this idea, the truth that we have in the Rig Veda, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. That became his clue. That became the key on which he based his entire interpretation of the Veda, which is that there is one supreme deity under which is spoken of under many names, and all these names, which are cosmic powers or cosmic deities, Vedic deities that Alok Bhai was also talking about, they are his power and qualities. So this is one key on which entire Vedic philosophy, Vedic interpretation of Swami Dayananda Saraswati is based, and how Sri Aurobindo explains that it was on this foundation that he found three important other clues in the Veda, which were one, that if there is one supreme deity, and all the other devas, the names by which this supreme deity, which he said, the only way, because it's a nameless, formless, one supreme, if we have to give it name, it would be the most primordial sound, Om. That's what he said. That is the supreme deity. If that is true, that there is one supreme deity and all cosmic devas are his power or qualities, then Veda must contain psychological truths or psychological teachings on the basis of which we human beings can walk the Godward path. Because there is a psychological science in the Veda, it's a teaching for us to follow that and go towards that one supreme deity. So again, looking at Sri Aurobindo's psychological interpretation of the Veda, why he would feel so indebted in a way to the right clue given by Swami Dayananda was this, that he found Veda to have that psychological knowledge. He also, the second point would be, he also understood that Veda also has cosmological knowledge, that if there is one supreme deity, and that one supreme deity governs, runs the entire existence, then how is that one deity, one supreme power connected to all the other powers, so that cosmological knowledge must also be there. He went even a step further, that even topics related to or truths related to physical science, we can also find clues to that in the Veda. And this is one point that even till this day, there is a lot of question asked, but Sri Aurobindo had a very interesting statement in support of Swami Dayananda. So psychology and ethics, cosmology, and even scientific truth. With regard to the last one, scientific truth, I want to just read out one statement of Sri Aurobindo where he not only acknowledged that it is possible, he even added his own conviction. He said, the Veda contains other truth of a science the modern world does not at all possess. Dayanand was rather understated than overstated the depth and range of the Vedic wisdom. So he says, wait for some time. Maybe there are things that Swami Dayananda has said about the truths of physical science found in the Veda. You'll find it becoming more and more true. So he kept that window open. So if the path to inner awakening, if the path to Vedic wisdom goes from an understanding of how divine nature and soul are connected, according to Sri Aurobindo's understanding of Swami Dayanand's work, he was able to bring out that connection really well in his interpretation of the Veda. So that's why he said that he was the first provider of the right clues into the recovery of the Veda from all the obscurantistic and ritualistic interpretations that were going on at that time. So this is about the recovery of the Veda part. Next, how he wasn't satisfied by just talking about how great Veda's truths are. He said, now we have to make this Vedic religion a foundation of building a new nation and taking our civilizational work further. So he was very cognizant of the need to build strong institutions. So in 1875, he founded Arya Samaj. And he felt that most of the Hindu customs, practices, the way people were practicing Hindu religion had become superstitious, truth had gone out, and only the Vedic path can bring Hindu dharma or Sanatan dharma also to its true roots, true origin. And Arya Samaj was of course started in Mumbai, but it became very popular in Punjab because of certain temperamental, this is again Sri Aurobindo's explanation, that it temperamentally fit with Punjabi temperament, of the Punjab, people growing up in Punjab or living in Punjab, because of the core principles of Arya Samaj. The three core principles of Arya Samaj were Purushartha, Karma, and freedom. And the Punjabi temperament, maybe that's why I'm doing the speech here. We like freedom. We like to do concrete action. I mean, I'm generalizing here, sorry, I shouldn't be doing that. But these three things, and to put metaphysical truths into concrete action, and to do it in freedom, and to do it with a sense of responsibility. That's where the Purushartha model comes in. So these three were very foundational to the way people of Arya Samaj, members of Arya Samaj would work. I have studied in Arya Samaj school for 10 years. First, grade 1 and grade 2, I was in a convent. I have no memory of that, thankfully. But up to grade 12th, I studied in a DAV school, Dayanand Anglo-Vedic school. Education was one of the major tasks Arya Samaj movement took up. Not just education, but also particularly at that time, education for girls and women. And again, I have a personal connection to that. My mother in Punjab, in Jalandhar, her parents, my grandparents felt comfortable enough in sending their first daughter, oldest daughter, to a DAV teacher training school where she had to stay in a hostel. Because this, you have to keep the time frame in mind. This was the time British education was everywhere. That was the ticket to a good life. And at that time, to have Arya Samaj spread education, open schools in every nook and corner of Punjab and North India. I studied in Delhi. It was quite an amazing feat. To this day, I think DAV, you have about 800 schools. Things are not ever, over a period of time, they always change. Especially after the founder is no more, things devolve, things go in directions that they shouldn't have gone, but the ideal is important. So Purushartha, freedom, and karma. This I've already talked about it. Vedic religion as national foundation. This freedom part is very interesting. So yes, individual freedom, social freedom. Another aspect that they were really, because there was a reformist element to Arya Samaj movement as well. One of the things was that at that time, and as Alokji was also pointing out, due to various reasons, study of Vedas had become limited to people of certain backgrounds. And this was one point that Swami Dayanand Saraswati and people who followed him, even up to like Mahatma Hansraj, they were quite opposed to this idea. They said study of Vedas, independent study of Vedas should be open to all genders, people of all backgrounds. And one of the things that even as a student at DAV school, I had this, every day we were asked to recite 10 principles of Arya Samaj. And one of those principles was study of Vedas, that you will regularly read and try to understand whatever you can of some Vedic knowledge. And we had small booklets that our schools would sell. What are the basic truths of the Veda and things like that. Sri Aurobindo, since I want to kind of keep the focus in here, what Sri Aurobindo said, one of the principal ways in which Swami Dayanand Saraswati thought of or talked about or actually did make Vedic religion or Vedic truths as the foundation for nation building work was by highlighting the Aryan quality. That's why the word Arya Samaj. And Alok Bhai did talk a little bit about what Arya means. And tomorrow in my talk on integral education, that's actually one of the key focus that I would bring. Because rethinking education requires us to bring that Aryan character. But in the true understanding of what Aryan means, and Swami Dayanand Saraswati provided that not by just only his talks, by actually embodying that Aryan quality. This is where Sri Aurobindo has a lot of glowing things to say about Swami Dayanand, that he embodied that Aryan character. He was, very sincere, straightforward in his work, in his expression, and he candidly said what needed to be said. So he was not hesitant or politically correct. He had this, what Sri Aurobindo said, he brought back the manliness of the Aryan character. Aryan character is a synthesis of Brahmatej and Kshatratej, the one who seeks wisdom, the one who seeks power. So without power, Aryan quality is incomplete. So the courage, the manliness, all that Swami Dayanand Saraswati brought back to the Indian character, and which is again another reason why Punjabi temperament kind of took, because Arya Samaj movement became very important. You will be surprised to hear how many of the Indian freedom fighters coming from Punjab were deeply influenced by Arya Samaj movement. Lala Lajpat Rai, Lala Munshi Ram, Bhai Parmanand, Bhagat Singh, then of course from Maharashtra, the Savarkar. Many of these were deeply influenced by Arya Samaj's teaching. Bhagat Singh is interesting because he was raised in a Sikh family. And Swami Dayanand Saraswati had some not so positive things to say about Sikh tradition. And yet, as an agnostic, he found very beautiful teachings in Arya Samaj that shaped his understanding of what he was supposed to do. And this is why so I already talked about these things. Yeah, this is where I was. Because the freedom was such an important value for Swami Dayanand, so naturally political freedom, nation's freedom also became very important. So that's why when these leaders, especially like Lala Lajpat Rai, Lala Munshi Ram and Bhai Parmanand, Sri Aurobindo gives these 3 examples, and I did some research and I found that they were all expelled. This is after Swami Dayanand's death, by the way. So the founder is gone. This is early 1900s. All of them very actively involved in freedom movement. Lala Lajpat Rai, most of us know. He was one of the, the Lal Bal Pal, the revolutionary, the extremist group. Bhai Parmanand and Lala Munshi Ram were also doing in different capacities. In fact, Lala Munshi Ram, who became Swami Shraddhanand later on, they were even, or one of them, they even went to the US and they joined hands with some of the works being done by Gadar Party. So when these kinds of things were going on, Arya Samaj got a little worried as a movement, and they expelled all of these 3 out, one after the other. And Sri Aurobindo made a comment about that in Vande Mataram, which I find very interesting and very relevant. And this is what he said. I'm going to read the whole thing. I think that's interesting. He actually wrote it as an editorial in Vande Mataram, and he said this is a warning to Arya Samaj. If Arya Samaj has to remain relevant as a movement, it should not go away from the teachings of its founder, which was about courage and truthfulness, because the truth was so important in Swami Dayanand's teaching of the Veda, that truth is the central, truth, action, true understanding, truth speaking, everything that we were hearing from Alokda also. So he said, Sri Aurobindo cautioned Arya Samaj movement. Arya Samaj will perish from the face of India and leave no trace behind if such an attitude prevails. So Bhai Parmanand was teaching at DAV College, Lahore. His position was taken. Lala Lajpat Rai was removed from all the posts that he had within Arya Samaj, and Lala Munshi Ram, who later became Swami Shraddhanand, he was expelled completely from Arya Samaj. So in some ways, the movement had started to go away few years after. Swami Dayanand Saraswati dies in 1883, and in 1905, 1907, this sort of walking away from some of the teachings of the founder started. So, and then Sri Aurobindo said another, in that same cautionary note, he says, the world has no use any longer for religious bodies which exclude courage, manliness, generosity, justice, and patriotism from their moral practice. It's a very good note of caution, right? No, it could have been a reaction to that, but also there were some reports coming out from British press. They talked of Arya Samaj movement as a dangerous movement. So when I read that, I was said, okay, Sri Aurobindo, the most dangerous man, Arya Samaj, the most dangerous movement, because they said this movement is spreading seditious sentiment. So Arya Samaj wanted to protect itself. So they wanted to distance a little bit. They didn't close down schools or anything. They just distanced themselves from these three individuals who became very vocal and very active in the freedom movement. So this is one interesting tidbit that I found. Another thing was that at one point of time, Gandhi had made a criticism of Arya Samaj movement. And Sri Aurobindo was told about that criticism in one of his evening conversations that he used to have. So with that, I'll close my little presentation. So Gandhi criticized on 2 points. One, because Swami Dayanand's teaching was all about one supreme deity, and in his vision, no avatarhood is possible. That divine will not take human incarnation on earth. So when he interpreted Bhagavad Gita, he talked of Sri Krishna as a Mahayogi. He did not talk of Sri Aurobindo as a divine incarnation. So this is one point on which Gandhiji criticized Swami Dayanand's interpretation of the Veda. And second, he said by removing Murti Puja out of the Hindu understanding of how things work, that cannot fly, because most people are not ready to go to the formless without having a form in between, or without having the need to worship a form. So he said that's the anti-idol worship aspect of Arya Samaj or Swami Dayanand's teaching that he criticized. And I can say this as someone who had studied for 10 years and taught, by the way, I taught for 5 years at 2 different DAV schools. There is a sort of a hypocrisy in modern DAV movement. All around we have photos of Swami Dayanand and Mahatma Hansraj, and yet we are told when we are learning about the 10 principles of Arya Samaj, no Murti Puja. So, that obviously was very obvious to us. And I grew up in a family where, of Ram Bhakt. So a lot of Murti Puja type of thing was all around me. And so how my parents explained to me was that this is the Sanatani way and this is the Arya Samaji way. But what is important to know is when Swami Dayanand Saraswati founded, when he founded Arya Samaj, he did not say it is anything non-Hindu or non-Sanatani. It was just taking Sanatan back to its roots. So later on, things get added on. So that part we have to understand. So when Mahatma Gandhi kind of criticized Swami Dayanand and Arya Samaj, this is what Sri Aurobindo said. Sri Aurobindo said, yeah, okay, fine, I understand we all need idols or forms to get closer to the divine, because most humanity is not ready to even conceive of a formless divine. But then he said, but Gandhi himself engages in similar idolatry. What kind of idolatry Gandhi was engaging in? He said, of the charkha, of khaddar, and of non-violence. So anything, human mind is such that we can take anything and put it on this pedestal of an idol, a murti to worship. So even worship of an ideal is like an idol worship. And then Sri Aurobindo, being Sri Aurobindo, he said another thing. He said, if you read the full statement of Mahatma Gandhi, he said his statement was idolatry of the Quran and of Christianity, which is also an idolatry of the Bible, the Christ, and the cross. So all humanity needs some sort of formless, some sort of form to kind of, connect. Through the form, we go to the formless. That's why we have Sri Aurobindo's beautiful poem titled Form. He says, revere the form because in the form, formless exists. So that's why the synthesis that only Sri Aurobindo can give is important. So yes, by vehemently opposing Murti Puja, Arya Samaj sort of did become somewhat of a movement which could not go beyond a certain kind of mindset. So, like I'm a prime example. I grew up with both these things simultaneously. Never for a moment this occurred to me that what my parents are doing is not right. But at the same time, whatever is happening in the school. So another idolatry that happens in Arya Samaj movement as it is practiced today is the focus on Homa, the Havan, which was a weekly ritual for us in the school. And I taught in a school where we had lots of Afghani students. It was in the southern part of Delhi, so embassies are close by, and somehow we got a lot of Afghani origin students practicing Muslims, and they would not sit on this imposed ritual that is part of the Arya Samaj movement or the DAV schools. So what I wanted to kind of bring this is that yes, he was the discoverer of the right clues. He brought in this spiritual practicality to nation building work. I'll just kind of summarize with that. Found keys to the doors that time had closed, fastened on essential truths. So this part is what we need to take as a takeaway lesson, that bringing spiritual knowledge to concrete action, synthesizing the two, and on the foundation of truth, the right clues to which he found the Vedic truth. So with that, I will close. And I hope I've kept the time. So, because Nimeshji was very particular last night, time. So I hope it's been a little orientation to Swami Dayanand's work and our, beginning of our journey and paying our tribute to Swami Dayanand as we move forward with the conference. So thank you for patient listening. Post lunch, I hope not too many nap movements.